I woke at 4 because the radiator in my apartment only worked until midnight. After that, the cold came through the walls, and I learned it was easier to get up than to lie there shivering. I dressed in the dark and walked 3 blocks to the subway station where the man with no legs sold newspapers. I bought one every morning even though I never read it. He nodded at me, and I nodded back, and that was the only conversation I had most days. The hotel kitchen smelled like grease and bleach. I tied my apron and started on the carrots because Carlos, the prep cook, had quit 2 days ago and no one had replaced him yet. My hands knew the work, without my brain needing to be present. Julienne, brunoise, bâtonnet. French words for French cuts that would end up in someone's mouth and be forgotten in seconds. The sous chef was screaming at someone about a broken thermometer. The dishwasher was smoking in the alley even though his shift didn't end until 6. I kept my head down and my knife sharp, and I thought about nothing, which was the best part of my day. My mother used to say I had quiet hands. She meant it as a compliment, but I knew what she really meant. I didn't make noise. I didn't take up space. I was the kind of daughter who could disappear into corners, and that was useful in a house where my father came home drunk and looking for reasons to be angry. She left when I was 8. I woke up one morning and her clothes were gone, and there was $20 on the kitchen table. I used it to buy bread and kept the change in a jar under my bed. My father found it 3 weeks later and spent it on vodka. I learned then that having something meant someone could take it away. I left Russia when I was 19. I had been saving for 2 years, working at a factory that made buttons. Small white buttons that would end up on shirts, that would end up in stores I would never shop in. I saved enough for a plane ticket and a month's rent in Brooklyn, and I left without telling anyone. My father was passed out on the couch when I walked out the door. I did not look back. New York was not what I expected. It was louder and dirtier and more expensive, but it was also a place where no one asked questions. I could work and sleep and disappear, and that was enough. The kitchen had a rhythm: prep from 4 to 7, breakfast service from 7 to 11, lunch prep from 11 to 2. I existed inside that rhythm like a heartbeat, steady and unremarkable. The other cooks talked about their lives, girlfriends, rent, weekend plans, but I never contributed. They stopped trying to include me after the first month. I was grateful. At 6:30, Paul came into the kitchen. He was the day manager, and he had the kind of face that always looked like he was about to apologize. He wiped his hands on his pants even though they weren't dirty. "We need someone upstairs." I kept cutting. "I do prep." "Margot called in sick, the party's already seated. Get Lisa. Lisa's on the floor. It's just for one service. You carry plates, you don't talk, you're done in an hour." I looked at him. His left eye twitched when he was nervous. It was twitching now. "What kind of party?" "Private. High profile." He lowered his voice. "Don't make eye contact. Don't linger. Don't remember anything you hear." I set down my knife. "You're asking me to be invisible." "I'm asking you to work." "Same thing." I washed my hands and changed into a clean shirt. My reflection in the metal paper towel dispenser looked like a stranger. Dark circles, hollow cheeks, hair pulled back so tight it hurt. I looked like someone who had given up, and maybe I had. But giving up meant surviving, and surviving was all I knew how to do. The Eastman room was on the 3rd floor, past the main dining room and down a hallway that smelled like old carpet and expensive cologne. I pushed the door open with my shoulder and stepped inside. 8 men, dark suits, silence so thick I could taste it. I set the tray on the sideboard and started placing plates. Seared scallops, microgreens, some kind of foam that probably had a French name. My hands moved automatically and I kept my eyes down, and I tried to blend into the wallpaper. But then I heard his voice. It was not loud. It was not angry. It was the kind of voice that made you understand that volume was irrelevant when you had power. "Tell me why I should believe you." I glanced up without meaning to. The man at the head of the table was maybe 50, with grey threading through dark hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. His hands were folded on the table in front of him, and he was staring at the man across from him with the kind of attention that felt like a physical weight. The other man was sweating. His collar was damp and his hands were shaking slightly. "I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know the shipment was dirty." "That's not an answer. I'm telling you the truth. No, you're telling me what you think will keep you alive." I set down the last plate and started backing toward the door, but the man at the head of the table raised one finger. Not his whole hand, just one finger. And I stopped. He did not look at me. He kept his eyes on the sweating man, but I knew the gesture was for me. "Wait." I waited. My heart was beating too fast and my palms were damp, and I could feel the weight of every second stretching out like pulled taffy. Finally, he turned his head and looked at me. His eyes were dark brown, almost black, and they did not blink. "Did you hear what we were discussing?" I thought about lying, but something in his face told me that he would know, and that lying would be worse than the truth. "Yes. And I don't know enough to have an opinion. But you have one anyway." It was not a question. I looked at the sweating man, and I looked at the man at the head of the table, and I made a decision that I did not fully understand. I think he believes what he's saying, but I don't think that makes him innocent. The room went so quiet I could hear the fluorescent lights humming overhead. One of the other men shifted in his seat. Someone cleared their throat. The sweating man stared at me like I had just set him on fire. The man at the head of the table leaned back in his chair. His expression did not change, but something in the air shifted. Why? Because people can believe their own lies, especially when the truth would cost them something. He studied me for what felt like a long time. Then he nodded once. "Get out." I left. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the tray to keep it steady. I went back downstairs to the kitchen and finished my shift, and I did not tell anyone what had happened. I scrubbed pans until my fingers were raw, and I thought about the way that man had looked at me. Not like I was a person, like I was a problem he was trying to solve. I took the subway home and climbed the 4 flights to my apartment. The lock stuck, the way it always did, and I had to jiggle the key for 30 seconds before it opened. Inside, the air was cold and smelled like mildew. I sat on the couch that had come with the apartment and stared at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a map of some country I would never visit. I thought about the sweating man. I wondered if he was still alive. I did not sleep well that night. 2 days later, Paul called me into his office. He looked even more nervous than usual. He was holding a piece of paper, folding and unfolding it like he was trying to turn it into something else. "You're being transferred." I sat down without being invited. "Transferred where?" "Upstairs, private events." "I don't want to work upstairs." "Your pay is doubling. You start tomorrow." I looked at him. His eye was twitching again. "Who requested this?" He did not answer. He did not need to. I wanted to say no. I wanted to walk out and find another job at another hotel in another part of the city, but doubling my pay meant I could move to an apartment with heat. It meant I could stop buying day-old bread. It meant I could send money to my cousin in Moscow who was raising 2 kids on a grocery store salary. "Fine," I said. The private events floor was different. The carpet was thick enough to swallow sound. The lights were dimmed to a permanent twilight. The clients wore watches that cost more than I would make in 5 years, and they spoke in low voices about things I did not understand. Mergers, acquisitions, offshore accounts. I learned to move through rooms like a ghost. I anticipated needs before they were spoken. I refilled glasses before they were empty. I cleared plates without making a sound. And I listened, even though I was not supposed to. You learn things when people think you are invisible. I learned that the councilman in room 4 was taking bribes from a construction company. I learned that the CEO in room 7 was sleeping with his assistant and his assistant's sister. I learned that the woman in room 2 was laundering money through a charity for sick children. And I learned that the man from the Eastman room came to the hotel every Wednesday at 8 o'clock. He always reserved the same room. He always arrived alone. And he always left before midnight. His name was Alexei Morozov. I did not learn this from him. I learned it from the reservation book that Paul kept locked in his desk drawer. I learned it from the bartender who whispered it to the hostess when they thought no one was listening. I learned it from the way people's voices changed when they said it, like the name itself had weight. I did not look him up. I did not want to know. But I heard things anyway. Fragments of conversations. Warnings from other staff members. He owned half the construction in the city. He had connections to people in Moscow. He made problems disappear, and sometimes people disappeared with them. I did not want to believe it. But I also did not disbelieve it. On my 4th week working upstairs, I was clearing glasses from the bar when I heard shouting from the Eastman room. It was muffled, but I could hear the anger underneath it, sharp and jagged. I should have ignored it. It was not my business. But I heard something else underneath the shouting, a sound like furniture scraping, like someone being shoved against a wall. I set down the glasses and walked toward the room. The door was open a crack, and I could see 2 men standing too close to each other. One of them had his hand inside his jacket. The other was backing toward the window. And Alexei was standing between them. He was not shouting. He was not even speaking. He was just standing there, and somehow that was worse than any threat. The man with his hand in his jacket pulled out a gun. I did not think. I pushed the door open and walked in. Everyone turned to look at me. The man with the gun took a step back. The other man froze. Alexei's expression did not change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. I kept my voice steady. The manager asked me to remind you that the hotel has a strict no-weapons policy. If you need to continue this conversation, you'll need to take it outside. The man with the gun stared at me. Who the hell are you? No one. Then get out. I will. After you put that away. He looked at Alexei, waiting for some kind of signal. Alexei did not move. He just looked at me, and I looked back, and I realized that I had just done something incredibly stupid. The man with the gun shoved it back into his jacket. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Alexei said quietly. The 2 men left. The door closed behind them. And I stood there in the empty room with Alexei Morozov, trying to remember how to breathe. He walked over to the sideboard and poured himself a drink. Whiskey. Neat. He did not offer me one. What's your name? Elena. Elena what? Volkov. He took a sip and studied me over the rim of his glass. You shouldn't have done that. I know, but you did it anyway. Yes. Why? Because someone was about to do something that couldn't be undone, and I thought maybe I could stop it. You don't know me. No. You don't owe me anything. I know. He set down his glass. You're either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. He almost smiled. Almost. Go home, Elena Volkov. And don't come back to this floor. I left. I went home and sat on my couch and stared at the water stain on my ceiling, and I thought about the way he had looked at me. Not like I was invisible. Like I was visible for the first time in my life. It terrified me. The next day, Paul told me I was being transferred again. This time, I would be working as a personal assistant. The pay was triple what I had been making in the kitchen. Who's the client? I asked. Paul handed me an address in Midtown. You start at 9 tomorrow. The building had a doorman who looked at me like I was something he had. Scraped off his shoe. I gave him my name and he made a phone call, and then he stepped aside. The elevator was slow and smelled like furniture polish. It took me to the top floor where there was only one door. I knocked. A man in a dark suit opened it. He looked me up and down, then stepped aside without speaking. The apartment was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, bookshelves that covered an entire wall. And sitting in a chair by the window, reading a newspaper, was Alexei Morozov. He did not look up when I walked in. Close the door. I did. Sit. I sat on the couch and waited. He finished the article he was reading, folded the newspaper precisely in half, and set it on the side table. Then he looked at me. "Do you know who I am? Your name is Alexei Morozov. What else do you know? That people are afraid of you. Are you afraid of me?" I thought about lying, but I had already lied to him once in the Eastman room, and I did not want to start this job, whatever it was, with another lie. "Yes. Good. Fear means you're paying attention." He leaned back in his chair. "I'm going to tell you what I do, and then you're going to decide whether you want this job. I run an organization that operates outside the law. I make decisions that end lives. I associate with people who would kill you without hesitation if they thought it would benefit them. If you work for me, you will see things that will disturb you. You will keep secrets that could destroy you. And if you betray me, even once, you will not get a second chance." I kept my face neutral. What would I be doing? Managing my schedule, coordinating my meetings, handling correspondence, observing the people I meet with and telling me what you notice. Why me? Because you walked into a dangerous situation without being asked. Because you stayed calm. Because you made a choice that benefited someone else at your own expense. And because when I asked you if you were afraid, you told me the truth. I looked at him. His hands were folded in his lap and his posture was relaxed, but I could feel the tension underneath it. He was offering me something, and I did not fully understand what it was. But I understood that refusing would mean going back to the kitchen, back to the apartment with no heat, back to being invisible. And I was tired of being invisible. "I'll do it." He nodded once. "You start tomorrow." The work was easier than I expected. I answered phones using scripts he had written. I scheduled meetings at restaurants and offices whose addresses I memorized but did not write down. I kept a calendar that was partially in code, names replaced with initials, locations replaced with numbers. I learned his routines. He woke at 5. He read for 2 hours before his first meeting. He drank his coffee black and never finished a full cup. He took calls in Russian, Italian, and English, and his tone never changed regardless of the language. I also learned that people came to him the way supplicants come to a king. They sat across from him in the living room, and they asked for things: favors, protection, permission. And he listened, and then he made decisions that I did not fully understand, but that left people either relieved or terrified. One afternoon, a man came to the apartment. He was young, maybe 30, with expensive clothes and nervous hands. He sat on the couch across from Alexei and talked for 10 minutes about a shipment that had been delayed, a buyer who was threatening to walk, a timeline that was collapsing. Alexei listened without interrupting. When the man finished, Alexei was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You're lying." The man's face went pale. "I'm not. You're lying about the buyer. There is no buyer. You lost the shipment and now you're trying to buy time while you figure out how to replace it." The man opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "How did you—" "Because you didn't look at me once while you were talking. Because your story has too many details in the wrong places. And because I already made 3 calls before you got here." Alexei's voice was calm, almost gentle. "You have 48 hours to make this right. If you don't, I'll assume you're either incompetent or a thief. Neither one ends well for you." The man left. I watched him walk to the elevator and I saw the way his hands were shaking. Alexei looked at me. "What did you notice?" He was lying. Obviously. What else? I thought about it. He was scared before he even walked in, which means he already knew you knew. And he came anyway, which means he's either desperate or stupid. Or both. Alexei stood and walked to the window. People lie for 2 reasons: because they're trying to protect something, or because they're trying to take something. The first type can be managed, the second type needs to be removed. Which type was he? I'll know in 48 hours. I went back to my desk and updated the calendar, and I tried not to think about what would happen if the man did not make things right. 2 days later, Alexei told me the man had handled it. I did not ask how. The weeks blurred together. I woke early, went to the apartment, managed Alexei's day, and went home late. I was making more money than I had ever made in my life, and I was saving almost all of it. I moved to a new apartment in Astoria with heat and windows that closed properly. I bought a winter coat that was not from a thrift store. I sent money to my cousin in Moscow, and she called me crying because it was enough to pay for her daughter's school tuition. I should have been happy, but I was not happy. I was just less cold. One evening, I was organizing files when the door opened and a woman walked in. She was tall and beautiful in the way that women are when they have never had to think about money. Her hair was perfect. Her clothes were perfect. She looked at me like I was a smudge on a window. "Where's Alexei?" "He's in a meeting." "I'll wait." She sat on the couch and crossed her legs, and I went back to the files. After a few minutes, she spoke again. "How long have you been working here?" 3 months. "And what exactly do you do?" "I manage his schedule." She laughed, and it was not a kind sound. "Is that what he told you?" I did not respond. "Let me give you some advice. Don't think you're special. He hires people like you all the time, and when he's done with them, he moves on." "I don't think I'm special." "Good, because the last girl who worked here thought she was, and she's not around anymore." "What happened to her?" The woman smiled. She made the mistake of thinking Alexei cared about her. The office door opened and Alexei walked out. He looked at the woman and his expression hardened in a way I had not seen before. "Irina, we need to talk." "No, we don't." "You can't just ignore me." "I can. I am." He walked past her to the desk and picked up a file. "Leave." She stood up, and her face was tight with anger. Is she the reason? "Leave, Irina." Is she? He finally looked at her, and I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach tighten. "If I have to ask you again, you won't like what happens next." She grabbed her purse and walked to the door. Before she left, she looked at me one more time. "You're not that special." The door slammed. Alexei stood there for a moment, staring at nothing, and then he turned to me. "Ignore her." "Is she dangerous?" "Everyone is dangerous, but no, she's just angry." "What did she want?" "Something I can't give her." He went back into his office and closed the door, and I sat at my desk and thought about what Irina had said. "You're not that special." And I knew she was right. I was not special. I was just someone who had learned how to survive by being useful. But there was a small, stupid part of me that wished I was wrong. 3 weeks later, the phone rang at 11 at night. I was at home, reading a book I had bought from a street vendor when I saw Alexei's name on the screen. "Yes?" "I need you to do something for me." His voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the fear underneath it. "What?" "I need you to go to an address in Queens and pick up my daughter. Her name is Katya. She's 6 years old. You're going to bring her to the apartment, and you're not going to let anyone see you." I sat up. "What's happening?" "Someone found out about her. I need her somewhere safe. Now." He gave me the address, and I memorized it. "What if something goes wrong?" "Then you run, and you don't look back." He hung up. I got dressed and took the subway to Queens. The address was in a neighborhood I did not recognize, and the building looked like it had been abandoned years ago. I climbed to the 3rd floor and knocked on the door that matched the number Alexei had given me. A woman opened it. She had dark circles under her eyes and hands that shook when she gestured for me to come inside. "You're Elena?" "Yes." "Come in, quickly." The apartment was small and smelled like cigarette smoke. There was a little girl sitting on a couch holding a stuffed rabbit. She looked up at me with wide, dark eyes, and I saw Alexei in her face. The woman handed me a backpack. "Her clothes are in here, and some food. She hasn't eaten much today." "What happened?" "I don't know. Alexei called and said to keep her here until someone came. He said you'd take her somewhere safe. I knelt down in front of Katya. Hi, my name is Elena. Your dad asked me to take you for a walk. Is that okay? She nodded, but did not speak. Good. We're going to hold hands, and we're going to walk to the subway, and we're not going to talk to anyone. Can you do that? She nodded again. I took her hand, and we left. The streets were quiet, and the subway was almost empty. Katya held my hand the entire way, and she did not let go even when we sat down. I did not try to make conversation. I just sat there, and I let her hold on to me, and I tried not to think about what kind of danger we were in. When we got to the apartment, Alexei was standing by the window. He turned when the door opened, and when he saw Katya, something in his face broke. He crossed the room in 2 steps and picked her up, and she wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face in his shoulder. He held her like she was the only thing keeping him alive. I stood by the door and did not say anything. After a long time, he looked at me and his eyes were wet. Thank you. I nodded. He carried Katya to the bedroom, and I heard him speaking to her in Russian, his voice low and soft. I sat on the couch and waited, and I tried not to think about what it meant that a 6-year-old girl had to be hidden from people who wanted to hurt her father. When Alexei came back out, he looked like he had aged 10 years. He sat down across from me and put his head in his hands. Her mother died 2 years ago, car accident. I've been keeping Katya hidden because I didn't want her to become a target, but someone found out. Who? People who want to hurt me. What are you going to do? I'm going to make sure they can't. I looked at him, and I saw the man who made people disappear, and I realized he was going to kill whoever had threatened his daughter. Do you need help? He looked at me like I had just said something in a language he did not understand. No, I need you to stay here. I need you to keep her safe. For how long? Until I come back. He left, and I did not see him for 4 days. During those 4 days, I took care of Katya. I made her meals even though she barely ate. I read her stories, even though she did not respond. I let her sleep in my bed when she woke up crying in the middle of the night. And slowly, slowly, she started to trust me. On the 3rd day, she spoke to me for the first time. Is my dad coming back? Yes. How do you know? Because he loves you, and people who love you always come back. She looked at me with those wide, dark eyes. Did your dad come back? No. Why not? Because he didn't love me the way your dad loves you. She reached out and took my hand, and we sat there in silence, and I realized that I was crying. On the 4th day, Alexei came back. He looked exhausted, and there was a bruise on his jaw, but he was alive. He walked into the apartment and went straight to the bedroom, and I heard him talking to Katya in that same low, soft voice. When he came back out, he sat down next to me on the couch. It's done. I did not ask what that meant. I'm moving her upstate. I have a house there. It's safer. I'm taking her tomorrow. And then? And then I come back and we keep working. I looked at him. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to know what you're part of. You need to know that this job isn't just phones and schedules. It's being willing to protect the people who matter even when it costs you something. I know. Do you? Yes. He looked at me for a long time, and then he nodded. Okay. The next day, I helped him pack Katya's things. She clung to me when it was time to leave, and I hugged her and told her I would see her soon. Alexei carried her to the car and I watched them drive away, and I felt the weight of something I did not have a name for. The apartment felt too quiet after they left. I sat on the couch and stared at the city outside the window, and I thought about the girl I had been 4 months ago. The girl who cut vegetables in a hotel kitchen and went home to an apartment with no heat. The girl who thought survival was the same thing as living. I did not know who I was becoming, but I knew I could not go back to who I had been. Over the next few months, things changed. Alexei was different when he came back from upstate. He was quieter, More careful. He spent less time in meetings and more time on the phone with Katya, speaking to her in Russian and listening to her. Talk about school and friends and things that had nothing to do with his work. And he was different with me. He started asking me questions, not about work, but about my life. What books I was reading, what I did on my days off, whether I missed Russia. I did not know how to answer most of his questions. My life had been so small for so long that I did not know how to make it sound interesting. But he listened anyway, and he did not interrupt. And I realized that he was trying to understand me. One evening, we were in the apartment late, and he was reviewing a contract while I updated the calendar. He set down the papers and looked at me. "Why did you leave Russia?" I stopped typing. No one had ever asked me that question before. Because there was nothing for me there. Family? My father. But he's not a reason to stay. Why not? I thought about lying. But I was tired of lying. Because he spent most of my childhood making me wish I didn't exist. Alexei was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I'm sorry. Don't be. It's not your fault." "No, but I'm still sorry it happened." I looked at him and I saw something in his face that I had not seen before. Understanding, not pity, just understanding. "Thank you," I said. We did not talk about it again, but something shifted after that night. He stopped treating me like an employee and started treating me like someone he trusted. And I stopped thinking of him as my boss and started thinking of him as someone I wanted to protect. It was a dangerous shift, but I did not try to stop it. In December, a man named Victor came to the apartment. He was one of Alexei's lieutenants, tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. He did not like me. I could tell by the way he looked at me, like I was a problem he was waiting to solve. He and Alexei went into the office and I stayed at the desk, but I could hear their voices through the door, low and tense. "She's a liability," Victor said. "She's not. She knows too much. She knows what she needs to know. And what happens when she decides to leave? What happens when she tells someone what she's seen? She won't. You don't know that. I do." There was a pause and then Victor said, "You're getting soft." "I'm being smart." "No. You're letting your feelings get in the way of your judgment." The door opened and Victor walked out. He looked at me as he passed, and I saw the warning in his eyes. When he left, Alexei came out of the office and sat down next to me. "He's wrong." "About what?" "About you being a liability." I looked at him. "Am I?" "No. You're someone I trust. And that's more valuable than anything else." I wanted to believe him, but I also knew that trust was a fragile thing in a world like this. 2 weeks later, I was at the apartment when the door opened, and a man I did not recognize walked in. He was young, maybe late 20s, with dark hair and a suit that looked expensive. He looked around the apartment like he was cataloguing everything for later use. "Where's Alexei?" "He's not here." "When will he be back?" "I don't know." He walked over to the desk and picked up one of the files. I stood up. "You can't touch that." He looked at me and smiled. "Who's going to stop me? You?" I kept my voice level. "Put it down." He set the file down but did not step back. "What's your name?" "Elena." "Elena." He said it like he was tasting it. "You're new." "I've been here 6 months." "That's new." He walked closer and I forced myself not to step back. "Tell Alexei that Dmitri came by. Tell him I'll be in touch." He left, and I stood there for a long time, staring at the door. Something about him made my skin crawl and I did not know why. When Alexei came back, I told him about Dmitri. His face went hard. "What did he touch?" "One of the files. That's it." Alexei walked over to the desk and checked the files, and then he pulled out his phone and made a call. He spoke in Russian too, fast for me to follow, and then he hung up. "I need you to stay here tonight." "Why?" "Because Dmitri is dangerous, and if he knows you work for me, he might come back." "What does he want?" "Something I'm not going to give him." He did not explain further, and I did not ask. But I stayed at the apartment that night, and I sat on the couch with a knife from the kitchen, and I listened to every sound. The building settling, the wind against the windows, the elevator stopping on different floors. Nothing happened, but the fear stayed with me long after the sun came up. Over the next few weeks, I noticed things, small things that did not make sense on their own, but felt wrong when I put them together. Alexei was tense. He was on the phone more often. He was meeting with people I had never seen before. And one night, I heard him arguing with someone in the office. I pressed my ear to the door, and I heard a name. Dmitri. I did not ask him about it. I did not want to know, but I could feel the tension building, and I knew that something was going to break. It happened on a Tuesday in January. I was at the apartment organizing files when the door opened and 3 men walked in. One of them was Dmitri. The other 2 were men I did not recognize, and they were carrying guns. I stood up, and Dmitri smiled. "Hello again, Elena." "Alexei's not here." "I know, but you are." He walked over to the desk and picked up a file, and I realized that he was not here for Alexei. He was here for me. "Come with us." "No." He nodded at one of the other men, and the man raised his gun and pointed it at my head. "Let me rephrase that. Come with us, or I'll kill you right here." I looked at the gun, and I looked at Dmitri, and I realized that I had 2 choices. I could go with them, or I could die, and I was not ready to die. So I went. They took me to a warehouse in Brooklyn. It was old and empty with broken windows and graffiti on the walls. They tied my hands behind my back and sat me in a chair. And Dmitri stood in front of me. "I'm going to ask you some questions, and you're going to answer them. If you lie, I'll know. And if you refuse to answer, I'll hurt you. Do you understand?" I nodded. "Good. Let's start with an easy one. How long have you been working for Alexei?" 8 months. "And what do you do for him?" "I manage his schedule." He laughed. "You manage his schedule? That's very sweet. What else?" "Nothing." He slapped me. It was not hard, but it was enough to make my ears ring. "Let's try that again. What else do you do for him?" "I answer phones, I organize meetings, I keep track of appointments." "And what do you know about his business?" "Nothing." He hit me again, harder this time. My cheek throbbed and I could taste blood. "You're lying." "I'm not." He crouched down in front of me and his face was inches from mine. "Let me explain something to you, Elena. Alexei Morozov is a very powerful man, and powerful men have enemies. I am one of those enemies. And if you want to survive this, you're going to tell me everything you know about him." I looked at him, and I saw the same thing I had seen in men like him my entire life. He thought I was weak. He thought I would break. "I don't know anything," I said. He stood up and nodded at one of the other men. The man came over and hit me in the stomach. I doubled over, gasping for air, and I tried not to cry. "Let's try this another way," Dmitri said. "Tell me where Katya is." I froze. "You know who I'm talking about, don't you? His daughter, the little girl he's been hiding." I did not say anything. "If you tell me where she is, I'll let you go. If you don't, I'll kill you. It's that simple." I looked at him, and I thought about Katya sitting on the couch in the apartment, holding her stuffed rabbit. I thought about the way she had held my hand when we walked to the subway. I thought about the way she had asked me if her dad was coming back, and I knew that I would rather die than tell him where she was. "I don't know," I said. He hit me again, and again, and again. I do not know how long I was in that warehouse. Time stopped meaning anything. There was only pain, and the sound of Dimitri's voice, and the knowledge that I could make it stop if I just told him what he wanted to know. But I did not tell him. And then I heard gunshots. The door to the warehouse exploded open and men poured in. I could not see their faces, but I could hear shouting, and I could hear the sound of bodies hitting the floor. And then everything went quiet. Someone untied my hands, and I looked up. It was Alexei. He was covered in blood and his eyes were wild, and he looked at me like he thought I was already dead. "Are you hurt?" I tried to speak, but my throat was too dry. He picked me up and carried me out of the warehouse, and I closed my eyes and let myself believe that I was safe. I woke up in a hospital. My ribs were bruised, my face was swollen, my hands were wrapped in bandages. Alexei was sitting in a chair next to the bed, and he was staring at the wall. "How long have I been here?" He looked at me. 3 days. "What happened to Dmitri?" "He's dead." I nodded. I should have felt something, relief maybe, or satisfaction. But I felt nothing. "You didn't tell him," Alexei said. "No." "Why not?" "Because he would have hurt her." He leaned forward and his voice was rough. "You could have died." "I know." "Then why?" I looked at him, and I saw the same thing I had seen the night he picked up Katya from the bedroom. He was not a man who made people disappear. He was a man who was trying to protect the only person he had left. "Because I know what it's like to grow up without anyone who cares, and I didn't want her to lose you." He did not say anything for a long time. And then he reached out and took my hand, and he held it like he was afraid I would disappear. "You're not just someone who survives," he said. "You're someone worth keeping." I stayed in the hospital for another week. Alexei came every day, and he brought me books and food and things that he thought I might need. He did not talk much, but he was there, and that was enough. When I was released, he took me back to the apartment. Katya was there, waiting for me. She ran over and hugged me, and I hugged her back. And I realized that somewhere along the way, this had become my family. Alexei did not go to the office that night. He sat with me on the couch, and we watched Katya play with her toys, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was home. "I'm moving her back here," he said. "I'm done hiding her. If anyone comes after her again, they'll have to go through me." "And me," I said. He looked at me, and he smiled. It was a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes. "Yes, and you." The months that followed were different. Alexei was still Alexei, cold, controlled, dangerous, but he was also softer around the edges. He read to Katya before bed. He took her to the park on weekends. He let her sit in his office and draw pictures while he worked. And he was softer with me. He asked me how I was feeling. He made sure I was eating. He stopped treating me like someone who worked for him and started treating me like someone he cared about. I did not know how to handle it. I had spent my entire life keeping people at a distance, and now I had a man who looked at me like I was the most important person in the world, and a little girl who called me by my name and asked me to braid her hair. It was terrifying, and it was perfect. One night after Katya had gone to bed, Alexei and I were sitting on the couch, and he turned to me. "I need to tell you something." "What?" "I'm not good at this. I don't know how to do this. But I care about you, and I don't want you to leave." I looked at him, and I saw the man who had carried me out of a warehouse, and the man who had held my hand in the hospital, and the man who was trying to be a father to a little girl who had already lost so much. "I'm not leaving," I said. "Promise me." "I promise." He leaned in and kissed me, and it was not a gentle kiss. It was desperate and hungry and full of everything he had been holding back. And I kissed him back, because I had been holding back too. We did not talk after that. We just sat there, holding each other, and I realized that for the first time in my life, I was not afraid. The next few months were the happiest I had ever been. I moved into the apartment officially, and I spent my days taking care of Katya and working with Alexei. I learned more about his business, and I learned how to navigate the dangerous world he lived in. I learned how to read people, and how to stay calm in tense situations, and how to protect the people I cared about. And I learned that I was stronger than I thought. But I also learned that happiness is fragile, and that there are always people who want to take it away. It happened on a night in March. Alexei, Had been gone for a few hours, meeting with someone about a deal that had fallen through. I was at the apartment with Katya. She was watching a movie and I was making dinner, and everything felt normal. And then the door opened, and a man I did not recognize walked in. He was holding a gun. I stepped in front of Katya, and she looked up at me with wide eyes. "Who are you?" I said. "Someone who's been looking for you." "I don't know you." "No, but you know Alexei, and he knows me." He raised the gun, and I realized that he was going to kill me, and then he was going to kill Katya. I did not think. I just moved. I grabbed the knife from the counter and threw it at him. It hit him in the shoulder and he dropped the gun. I ran at him and tackled him to the ground, and we fought. He was stronger than me, but I was faster, and I was fighting for something that mattered more than my own life. I grabbed the gun and pointed it at him, and he looked at me with wide eyes. "Who sent you?" "I'm not telling you anything." I pulled the trigger. The sound was deafening. The man went still. I dropped the gun and turned to Katya, who was staring at me with tears streaming down her face. "It's okay," I said. "It's okay, I'm here." I held her, and I tried not to think about what I had just done. I tried not to think about the fact that I had killed someone. When Alexei came home, he found us sitting on the couch covered in blood. He did not say anything. He just picked up Katya and carried her to the bedroom, and then he came back and sat down next to me. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head. "What happened?" I told him, and when I was done, he pulled me into his arms and held me. "You did what you had to do," he said. "I killed him. You protected her. You protected yourself. You did nothing wrong." I wanted to believe him, but I could still see the man's face, and I could still hear the sound of the gunshot, and I knew that I would never forget it. Alexei took care of everything. He made the body disappear. He cleaned the apartment. He made sure that no one would ever know what had happened. And then he held me while I cried, and he told me that I was safe. And I believed him. The weeks after that were hard. I could not sleep. I could not eat. I kept seeing the man's face every time I closed my eyes. But Alexei was there, and Katya was there, and they reminded me that I had done the right thing. And slowly, I started to heal. One night, a few months later, Alexei and I were sitting on the couch, and he turned to me. "I want to give you something." He handed me a small box, and I opened it. Inside was a key. "What's this?" "A key to the house upstate, the one where I took Katya. I want you to have it. I want you to know that you always have a place to go, no matter what happens." I looked at the key and I looked at him, and I realized that he was giving me more than just a key. He was giving me a future. "Thank you." He took my hand. "I'm not good with words. I don't know how to say what I feel. But I need you to know that you're the reason I'm still here. You're the reason Katya is still here. And I'm never going to let anything happen to you." I leaned in and kissed him, and I felt the weight of everything we had been through settle into something solid and permanent. "I know," I said, and I did. We stayed in the city for another year. Alexei continued running his business and I continued working with him. But things were different now. He was more careful. He was more selective about the jobs he took. He started delegating more, trusting other people to handle things that he used to handle himself. And then, one day, he told me that he was ready to step back. "I'm tired," he said. "I'm tired of living like this. I'm tired of looking over my shoulder. I want to give Katya a normal life, and I want to give you one too." "What does that mean?" "It means we move upstate. It means I hand over the business to someone I trust. It means we start over." I looked at him, and I saw the man who had once made people disappear, and I saw the man who had saved me, and I saw the man who had become the person I loved most in the world. "Okay," I said. We moved upstate in the spring. The house was exactly as I remembered it. Quiet, surrounded by trees, far away from everything. Katya started school, and she made friends, and she stopped having nightmares. Alexei spent his days reading and working on the house, and he stopped carrying a gun. and I spent my days taking care of them and learning how to be happy and believing that we were finally safe. One evening we were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset, and Alexei turned to me. "Do you regret it?" "Regret what?" "Leaving the city? Leaving everything behind?" I thought about the apartment with no heat, and the kitchen where I used to cut vegetables, and the warehouse where I had almost died. I thought about the life I had been living before I met Alexei, and the life I was living now. "No," I said, "I don't regret anything." He smiled and he took my hand, and we sat there in silence, watching the sky turn dark. Katya came out of the house and climbed into my lap, and she asked me to tell her a story. I told her about a girl who learned how to survive in a world that did not care about her. I told her about a man who was dangerous and kind in equal measure. I told her about how sometimes the people who save you are the ones you least expect. And when I finished, she looked up at me and smiled. "Is that a true story?" I looked at Alexei, and he looked at me, and I knew that he understood. "Yes," I said, "it's true." She fell asleep in my arms and I carried her inside and put her to bed. And when I came back outside, Alexei was still sitting on the porch watching the stars. I sat down next to him and he put his arm around me and I leaned into him. "I love you," I said. He did not say anything for a long time, and then he turned to me and he said, "It back. I love you too." And that was all we needed. We stayed in that house for the rest of our lives. We watched Katya grow up, and we watched her leave for college, and we watched her come back with a family of her own. We grew old together, and we never forgot where we came from or what we had survived. And every night, before I went to sleep, I thought about the girl I used to be. The girl who woke at 4 in the morning because the radiator only worked until midnight. The girl who cut vegetables in a hotel kitchen and thought that survival was the same thing as living. The girl who was invisible. And I was grateful. Grateful that she had survived long enough to become someone else. Someone who was seen. Someone who was loved. Someone who had found a place where she belonged. Because I was not invisible anymore. I was home.